Training Zone Simplified. 3, 5,
zone
7
lactate
different levels,
threshold,
aerobic, FTP. It's all very confusing. And there's so much advice about training zones out there. It's hard to know what to follow. Often the same terms mean different things depending on which system you follow or who is talking about it. Do the zones really matter that much? Well, kind of, but not with the exactness that most people think. In fact, you could throw away your heart rate monitors, GPS, lactate meters, continuous glucose monitors, power meters, and whatever else you use to measure. And as long as you stick to some basic principles, you'll get most of the way there. You can apply whatever system you use over the concepts in this video, or you can just apply the concepts themselves. This is how we'll do it. We'll cover 4 main sections: why training zones are a myth, the foundations of endurance fitness, understand performance horizons, adjust based on effects, why training zones are a myth. Try this out for yourself. Do a Google search of training zones, compare the results you get to each other. I'll guarantee they'll never match. Polar, Garmin, Training Peaks, Silo, and whatever other system you find will all be different. Exactness in training zones is a myth. It's never as simple as going from a heart rate of say 140 beats per minute to 142 and you're suddenly in a completely different training zone with a completely different effect. Even if you go into a sports laboratory, the points identified will depend on the way that the test is conducted, and there's even argument on how to interpret and identify the key points within the same test. Am I saying the zones are useless? Not at all. In fact, they can be very helpful in guiding our training to get the effect that we're after. Just don't believe they are as accurate as most try to portray them to be. The foundations of endurance fitness. Regardless of which system of training zones you use, there are some common pillars or concepts most have in common. Do lots of low intensity work, do a bit of high intensity work, do some work specific to your race. Sound too simple? Maybe. So what do we mean by low intensity? Without giving numbers or calling it a zone, think of easy as something you can comfortably hold for a long period of time. And I mean comfortably, not right on the edge for the distance. You should be able to carry out a conversation here. This should be the basis of the majority of your training. High intensity is hard work. It can be really hard, or it can be hard. You can do more of it if you dial the intensity back a little, but you have to do less volume if you really crank it up. High intensity training is potent. You don't need lots, but you do need some. The specific work will depend on what you're training for. It might be making sure you include hills or the terrain that you're going to race over. And this is why on some trails, you can't go by pace. It may be dialing in the pace and intensity expected for the race. Really, it's the link between the low and the high intensity work that gets you ready for race day. Understand performance horizons. This basically means it takes different time frames to develop different types of fitness to improve your endurance, workload tolerance, fat oxidation, aerobic capacity. It takes a long time. Think weeks and months. This is where volume and low intensity training comes in. It's why base periods have been a thing in training plans. On the other hand, developing your top end, your fast stuff, well, that can be improved in a much shorter time frame. Think 3 to 6 weeks to max this out within any training cycle. The problem is, this part of the improvement, it's easily seen. It's where we tend to try to get most of our gains. Unfortunately, the high intensity gains often plateau. Just trying to force more intensity doesn't help. Instead, we usually need the patience to keep working on the slower but ever increasing gains from the low intensity training. Adjust based on effects. So now you understand we need a lot of low intensity, some high intensity, and a bit of specific training. We understand the low intensity benefits tend to take time to see results, and the high intensity takes less time. Pay attention to how you respond and adjust. What happens if we push the low intensity up a little bit harder? Do you see any improvement over, say, 3 weeks? Or do you just feel tired and struggle in your faster runs? What happens if you ease back a little on your high intensity, but add a couple of extra repeats? Do you keep getting faster, but no longer feel wasted after the session? Or do you lose your snap and speed at the top end speeds? What if you've been following a plan, sticking religiously to the zones, but don't feel like you're improving? Maybe those zones don't quite suit your physiology. Maybe you haven't given it time. Now, I wouldn't make a change just within 2 weeks. I'd say you need 3 to 4 weeks to start seeing a true effect. And not everyone responds the same way. Pay attention to your results, make small adjustments, and see how you respond to them. I'm definitely not saying throw away your measuring devices. There is a lot of useful information in them, but we can also get caught up in the data for data's sake. There are many highly successful athletes who base their training on the simplicity of this feels easy and this feels hard. There's no need to overcomplicate it, but we do need to put in the work. And how do you know if you're getting fitter from all this training and adjustments? Well, I'll cover that in this video. 6 signs you're getting fitter. Keep on running.